In 2018, a couple named Marcus and Eliza decided to spend a long weekend hiking through the Olympic Peninsula in Washington state. They were experienced backpackers and had tackled far more difficult terrain before. The dense evergreen forests, mist-covered valleys, and quiet riverbeds were exactly the kind of isolation they loved. They had planned the trip for months and chose a trail that would take them deep into the backcountry, far from established campsites and other hikers. By late afternoon on their second day, they reached a clearing near a narrow river. Massive trees surrounded the area, their branches weaving together so tightly that very little sunlight touched the ground. It was beautiful, quiet, and completely cut off from the world. They decided it was the perfect place to set up camp. As Marcus pitched the tent, Eliza gathered firewood. That's when she first heard it, a faint metallic clinking sound somewhere across the river. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate. She assumed it was another camper adjusting gear, or maybe a distant hiker with trekking poles. But when she mentioned it to Marcus, he paused. They hadn't passed anyone on the trail all day. They shrugged it off. That night, after eating dinner and settling by the fire, the forest seemed unusually still. No crickets, no owls, not even the sound of the river felt right, like it had quieted somehow. Then, from across the water, they heard it again. Clink, clink, clink. This time, it was closer. Marcus stood up and scanned the tree line with his flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but revealed nothing except trunks and thick underbrush. The sound stopped the moment the light swept across the opposite bank. Eliza tried to laugh it off, suggesting it might be loose debris in the water, but there was no current strong enough to cause that kind of repeated metallic noise. They stayed up later than planned, feeding the fire and listening. Around midnight, just as they were about to turn in, a new sound emerged, slow steps moving somewhere beyond the trees behind their campsite. Not across the river this time, behind them. The steps were heavy, too heavy for a deer. Marcus whispered that it was probably a black bear. Bears were common in the area, but black bears typically avoid campfires and human voices. These footsteps weren't circling cautiously. They were steady, measured, intentional. The steps stopped just beyond the tree line. They waited. Then they heard breathing. It was faint but unmistakable. Deep, controlled inhales and exhales coming from the darkness. Not the snort of an animal, not the huffing of a bear. It sounded human. Marcus called out, his voice firm, asking if someone was there. No answer, only silence. They decided to retreat into the tent and let the fire burn out on its own. Inside the tent, every small sound felt amplified. Fabric rustled with the breeze, leaves shifted. Somewhere in the distance, a branch snapped. Then came the slow crunch of boots on gravel. Not paws, boots. The footsteps approached the dead fire pit first. They could hear stones shifting under weight. A long pause followed, as if whoever it was standing there, examining the campsite. Then the steps moved toward the tent. Eliza squeezed Marcus's arm so tightly it hurt. The shadow of something blocked the faint moonlight shining through the thin nylon walls. It stood only a few feet away. Neither of them breathed. A low whisper began just outside the tent. At first, it sounded like murmuring, too quiet to make out. Then it became clearer, not actual words, but something that mimicked the rhythm of speech. It rose and fell like a conversation, but it made no sense. Then another whisper joined it. Two distinct voices, both close, both speaking in overlapping tones, as if arguing softly. Marcus felt his heart pounding so violently he was certain whoever was outside could hear it. The voices circled the tent slowly. Gravel crunched on one side, then the other. The shadows shifted. One of the voices let out a short, breathy laugh. The whispering stopped abruptly. Silence swallowed the campsite again. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then came 3 slow taps against the side of the tent. Tap, tap, tap. Not scratching, not brushing against fabric, deliberate tapping, as though someone was testing the material. Eliza bit down on her sleeve to stop herself from making a sound. Suddenly, both sets of footsteps retreated into the woods at an unnatural speed, crashing through brush in a direction that had seemed too dense to walk through earlier that day. Within seconds, they were gone. But the metallic clinking sound returned, now deep within the forest behind them. Clink, clink, clink. It echoed for several minutes before fading into the distance. Marcus and Eliza didn't sleep. They lay frozen until the first faint light of dawn seeped through the trees. When birds finally began to chirp again, it felt like the forest had been switched back on. They packed in silence. As Marcus dismantled the tent, Eliza noticed something near the edge of their campsite, just beyond the fire pit. Half buried in the dirt was a rusted chain, coiled neatly into a circle. Attached to it was a small metal hook, the source of the metallic clinking. It hadn't been there the day before. Marcus looked toward the tree line where the breathing had come from. The underbrush was thick, nearly impossible to push through without leaving a clear path. There was no path, no footprints, no broken branches, nothing. They left the chain where it was and hiked back toward the trailhead without speaking. The entire way they felt the same sensation, like they were being paced from somewhere just out of sight, matching every step. When they finally reached their car, both of them felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over them. They never reported the incident. They never returned to that section of forest. But weeks later, when Marcus was cleaning out his backpack at home, he found something lodged in one of the side pockets, a small metal hook, identical to the one attached to the chain they had left behind.